All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of It Is What It Is podcast. I'm your host, Cody Kelly. I'm so excited about this episode. This is not just the NBA, but the sports world's response to social justice. I have an amazing panel. Connect with these guys. Look, connect with me on all digital platforms, Instagram, Facebook, anywhere you can find me, Twitter, just look me up. But I have an amazing panel. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. That's how dynamic. I'm going to start with former NBA player Terry Cummings. Then we'll go to attorney pal Tony Gill, and then the Bulls chaplain Scott Bradley. Terry, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Terry Cummings.
Look, Terry is being bashful. Let me read his stats.
Yeah, I don't
Over 1,100 games played professionally, 16.4 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, 2 assists. He shot field goal percentage of 48.4%, which is really impressive. 3-point field goal percentage of 29.5, free throws 70.6, ERA, or now we go by PER, 18. Just a dynamic, just NBA player. I had to look at it. I was like, wow, with those stats, you could make an all-star team now.
Yeah, quite possibly. That considering the last 7 or 8 years of my career, I never averaged over 10 points. So those numbers are built up from the first 10 years. But I truly did enjoy my career more the last 7 to 8 years.
Awesome. Look, glad to be here. I'm glad you were able to jump on. I really appreciate this. Attorney Pal, if you can introduce yourself.
Good evening. I'm Elliot Powell, attorney in Chicago, and I don't play anything. I have been a sports fan for a while. I've been a friend of Terry Cummings for about 40 years. I've been a friend of Scott Bradley for about 40 years. And Tony Gill, you're not as old as that, so I haven't been your friend for 40 years. And saw Cody grow up, and I enter into a lot of political discourse, and this kind of came to front, and I mentioned it to Cody, and Cody was all willing to go with it. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Awesome. And the good Reverend, and the former Bulls chaplain, Scott Bradley, if you can introduce yourself.
God bless you. I'm Scott Bradley. I served 37 years as the Chicago Bulls team chaplain. One of the distinct honors I had in that time, there were a lot of them, but one of the distinct honors I had was when the Chicago Bulls won their first championship in 1991. If you go back and get the old VCR with the old VHS tape, when we won, and in the locker room, we did the Lord's Prayer, and I was one that was blessed to be in the center of the huddle doing the Lord's Prayer with the team after our first championship. That was 1991. First of 6 during the course of the 90s, and been the Bulls chaplain. Just retired after this season, 37 years with the team.
Awesome. Look, I saw you on the MJ 10-part docuseries. Saw you giving a little pound to MJ. That's a nice little shout out, man. I can only imagine the stories that you have.
I think that was 1 or 2 cameos I had, and none of them were intentional. I was just there.
Jeez. And then I have with me amazing friend, look, NBC Sports Chicago, right, broadcaster affiliate. This dude is rising through the ranks of the sports. Really just probably becoming the new Stephen A. Smith. Is that the trajectory, Tony? Am I on it?
I like to play on camera and off the camera, more so off the camera. But thanks for having me, Cody. Appreciate all the distinguished gentlemen on this panel here. Tony Gill from NBC Sports Chicago. Follow me on Twitter at the Tony Gill on Twitter. And I'm just glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's get down to it. So first question, and I want to start with you, Terry, because, as a former NBA player, right, I kind of saw what the Bucks did after the shooting of Jacob Blake, really boycotting, decided not to play. What was your initial thought? So a 2-part question. A, what was your initial thought? And then B, if you were back, right, in your heyday, you're playing now, would you have done the same thing? And we'll start with you.
My initial thoughts were, just kind of caught me off guard, but it's really kind of indicative of the time that we're living in now, where they're more abreast to issues and things, and they take more form and action than we did. I think that our group in the 80s and 90s, we were just like our fathers before us in many ways. We just went to work. We went to work. We involved ourselves in the civil and social issues in our particular cities. Most of us did. not all of us, but it was not as extreme as, walking out and walking off the job. Although I think in this climate, it works, because I think in this climate, this generation has the benefits of some things that we did not have. And because we paved that road and laid that foundation, they can do these things. But we didn't even know we had the ability to do some of the basic things that the players do in this generation. So all in all, I think it was a decision that needed to be made, because I think we've always, there's enough of us on the line that can equate to this. We've always prayed. We've always marched. What we haven't always done is the by any means necessary. And whereas most people inflict in that thought to go to the furthest end of by any means necessary, the beginning of it is cutting off the head of the snake. If you cut them where it hurt them, they pay attention. And I think that is precisely what happened, not only with Milwaukee, but with the other teams in sports that stepped out as well. Because this is no longer a black issue; it's a social issue. Period.
Social issue. Reverend Bradley, I'm tied to you, and then to Attorney Powell. You were the Bulls chaplain for over 37 years, right? You actually have the 6 championship rings, right? So, like, being in the mix with those guys and those personalities, let's say if you could bring that team to today, would that 90s Bulls team do something similar? Or as Terry mentioned, we didn't even know we had those options. Would you just kind of think that they would just go as business as usual?
Well, interesting, in those championship runs, we had a high-profile fella by the name of Craig Hodges, who was very demonstrative in his race pride. And it seemed to backfire on him. He probably was the Colin Kaepernick of his day. And of course, you even go back further when you have guys like Muhammad Ali and other sports figures that would step out and make a statement by boycotting. In the case of Muhammad Ali, he refused to go to Vietnam. In the case of Craig Hodges actually spoke out. Well, actually, he went when the Bulls won their first championship. He went to the White House wearing a dashiki and sent a letter to President Bush, who was the president at the time, senior Bush, George H. Bush. He was the president at the time. Gave him a letter. The kickback on that was even the kickback on it. The rumor is it got him blackballed, and I personally believe that's what happened, because I remember after that talking with Cassie Russell, who at the time was a coach with the Atlanta Hawks, and I was talking to him about that. And he said, he said, "Let me tell you something." He said, when Craig Hodges' name came over the waiver wire, I talked to my people about, let's get Craig Hodges. He was a man who was a 3-point champion, I believe, 3 years in a row, who was a specialist from 3 points. And again, very demonstrative in his race pride. He not only wore dashiki to the White House, I had seen him come to the game wearing dashikis and the kufi, expressing his race pride. But as I was talking with Cassie Russell, he said, his name came over the waiver wire, and we went to I inquired with my people. So let's get Craig Hodges, and the guy said, no, bad news. That's what he said. So it gave him a stigma. And I also understand the first game of the NBA championship, he went to Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson, two of the biggest stars at that time, and asked them to boycott the first game. This was after the Rodney King beating in Los Angeles or in California, wherever that was. And of course, they refused to do it. But I will say that I saw a change in climate in recent years when it came to race relations among the players. But as Terry said, it was a different era then. Some of them were afraid to speak out. You had a few that did. And usually the repercussions were that their careers were over. We see it in the case of Colin Kaepernick. We saw it in the case of Craig Hodges. And how long did Muhammad Ali have to sit out before he was able to go back and fight because he made a stand? But I think in this day and time, you're going to see more. And I'm glad to see more men, not just men, but teams, and not just black players, but white players and other groups participating in as well, because they see the importance of now things have got to change. I'll say this, I'm old enough to remember the civil rights era. I'm old enough to remember Dr. King and Malcolm X, although I don't really remember him, but I do remember Dr. King quite well. And one of the things I've always said about the civil rights movement in the 60s is that there was an appealing by the nonviolent movement to appeal to the conscience of many white people. The problem was a lot of those white folk, particularly in the South, didn't have no conscience. But what I'm seeing now When I see the Black Lives Movement, when I see the protests, I don't just see black folk, but I see lots of white people. And so it appears as though the attitude of people has changed. And I think that it can bring change if it continues to be done in the right perspective, in the right way.
Awesome. Attorney Powell, are there any legal ramifications for this? Let's say, Milwaukee Bucks protested. They ended up resuming the next following week. I know the Lakers play tomorrow. But let's say one of their vendors that was supposed to be spotlighted or highlighted all of a sudden was not allowed to demo one of their products, right? And they paid for this space. Is there any legal ramifications? Because there'd be a potential lawsuit that we're not seeing here.
There might be, but we don't know. The only thing you can really know for sure is that vendor takes it to court and see what the court says about it. There's, I think Terry said it right, in as much as the players back then didn't know they had the power. Every so often, you did have somebody who came out and spoke to certain issues. I don't know if Scott remembers the baseball player Curt Flood. Flood played with the St. Louis Cardinals. He used to be traded to the Philadelphia Phillies, and he had associated it with slavery. And so he said he had under the amendment not to be traded. So some of this is testing. Now, our situation did go before the United States Supreme Court. And the court said he did not have a right to say he would not go and play, only because this was not truly employment. It was a national pastime. That's why baseball is one of the areas that still to this day is considered a pastime. Basketball players don't have a pastime. This is a real job. And so, with football and all that stuff as well. As far as whether a vendor would be successful in a lawsuit, that stands, that has not been court tested yet. So they'd have to go into court and see if they have that ability. And who knows, there may be somebody that's putting some kind of class action suit together, at this time for something like that. But I can't say whether it would be or not.
Yeah, and I might add to this is that because they're in the bubble, you don't have as many vendors anyway. It may be more advertisers and people who are doing marketing type things on the that would have gained their income by virtue of it having been viewed by the television audiences. But because they were not there, they have an argument. But I'm sure the NBA is doing some kickback because it ain't a fool. It ain't trying to lose no money at all, or allow that its overall title to be taken from it as the best in sports.
Right.
Awesome. Tony, I want to throw this to you, and then Terry, I have a follow-up question. Tony, so you work, obviously you have to have relationships with the professional athletes, right? Has this, not just the social justice, but the whole pandemic, has it created a strain or disconnect? Because like you mentioned before, we went live. For you to go down to the bubble, it would cost NBC Sports Chicago about $600 per day, right? So has it created an adversarial relationship between you and the players?
No, in terms of sports coverage, what I do know from speaking with people that are in the bubble and they haven't, received, any kind of distortion between their coverage. In fact, they're receiving more coverage more than ever because they're the only source and the only connecting period to the fan at this point. There are no, there might be a couple local beat people, but in terms of national coverage, it's the only way that fans can connect with the players and what's going on a day-to-day basis based on all the teams that are there. So right now, it's as important as ever that that media people are allowed to do their jobs and do their jobs in a correct fashion. Obviously, things have changed now. More Zoom conference calls and Zoom conference meetings, stuff like this. where players have to, go to, a room, sit down, and actually speak to the media. And that's across the board. That's across all sports. And obviously, we're talking about specific basketball right now. But that baseball, football, MLS is still going on. All hockey is still going on. Every league has adjusted to what's going on due to the pandemic right now. And just to bring it back home and tie it into what we were all just talking about, all of that stuff that's going on in the real world, it still affects the people that are in the bubble. And they are using their platforms. A lot of them, I'm not going to say all of them, a lot of them are using their platforms correctly. Even in this period of not really be able to connect with the media that they're used to. They're still using their platforms. They're still used to speak out and say things. With the Milwaukee Bucks, they refused to play. And they didn't just hide in the corner. I actually wrote a piece about this on NBC Sports Chicago about them getting on the phone with the family of Jacob Blake and getting on the phone with legislators in the Wisconsin area to actually get some tangible bill in place that people don't seem to know about and aren't talking enough about, that they got a bill sent to the governor during their phone call while they were sitting out against their playoff game against the Magic.
Oh, wow.
And obviously we have to follow up on what's going on now and what they're doing legally. The last I've heard, it's been pushed back, that vote. The majority Republican House, they don't want anything to do with that bill. But we have to keep the pressure on. And that's what the Milwaukee Bucks are doing, is constantly using their platform, using their connection to the local media that's in the bubble to speak out on what's going on and using it the correct way.
Awesome. Terry, well, we're talking about using that platform. Can you explain to us, as a professional athlete, like, I don't know, right? We don't understand the pressure that a professional athlete has, because they just can't be themselves, right? Even though we like to believe that, they have a job to do. And sometimes because of the salary that they make, people, I think, take them for granted, but they have an enormous amount of pressure, not just an ability to provide, but they're a brand ambassador for so many different entities, right? Can you explain to just the audience what that pressure is like? And then when you have to deal with this other extremity, this other social justice or pandemic, how that adds another layer to it?
Well, first of all, me and again, back to what Pastor Bradley was saying about Craig Hodges. Me and Craig Hodges have known each other for years. He came out of Chicago Heights, Illinois, and I grew up in Chicago. And we played together in San Diego. We were traded together to Milwaukee, where we played together for 5 years. And the thing about it is he was a Muslim. He was a practicing Muslim. And he and I would sit down and have the greatest conversations. And it was not about trying to convert him or him to convert me. It was trying to gain a better understanding. The thing is that with Hodge always had a mindset about just saying what he felt. And it wasn't always taken right, because a lot of times it's not about what you say, it's about how you say it, without compromising the message. The other part to answer the question, the thing about being a professional athlete is very difficult for you if you think you can go in there and separate your culture from your profession. If you go in there thinking that because I'm Black, I can't say certain things because the majority of the people I'm dealing with are Caucasian, then you've missed the whole point of being there. The whole point of leaving our communities, from the day we left our communities, where we are gems that were taken out of our environment, brought to other environments, shown the world, shown how everything works. That's our responsibility to go back and report to those communities how things are going on the outside. Because most people never get an opportunity to leave their neighborhoods. Now, every one of us on here, every man on this call right now, we have probably ventured outside our neighborhood, outside of our city, our state, our countries, more than the average person in the community we left will ever leave their neighborhood. And we have a responsibility to go back. And that's the difficulty for a lot of the cats that played even in my era, is they didn't know how to leave some of that stuff behind when you were going to get educated on how the real world was happening, and then bring back what you learned. Didn't mean you had to live in the city. It didn't mean you had to, buy a house in the same old neighborhood, but you needed to come back, because what was taken from that community, which is you, is missed in that community. It was placed there, if I may say, by God assignment. And so by God assignment, it has to be replaced. And that's how we teach and train. But I think the difficulty for most athletes is separating who they are from what they do. And I hope that it answers the question, because I played in 3 decades. I played in the 80s, I played in the 90s, and in the 2000s. I retired in 2000, but I watched gradually as the young cats came in, and they just came in not really understanding how the business of the game was. They knew how to play basketball, but didn't understand the business of the game or the professionalism that should go with the game. And you can't understand the professionalism if you don't know who you are. You have to come in there with some kind of maturity. And we were getting a lot of high school kids, or kids who were one or first year or second year player out of college and didn't have enough education on real life experiences to be in that pit of the NBA, because it's a business. And I think the difficulty is think about it for all of us again. If it had not been for the fact of having had the experience of staying in something long enough to learn it, we would be as ignorant to the business of the game and the business of life as most newcomers who are coming in.
That was well said. That made me really had to think. I want to throw this one to Pastor Bradley. Terry mentioned the business aspect of it, understanding the business of the game, and then having to understand that and yet still stay true to your identity. For you, Pastor Bradley, talk to us about that business. You mentioned, how you've seen the Bulls organizations evolve. You've seen the business aspect of it all the way from, you talked about the early 80s, the late 70s, the Artist Gilmore, all the way up to trading Scottie Pippen for Brent Berry, right? to drafting Jason Williams, and then the infamous motorcycle accident, right? Like, you've seen the business of it. How do you take the business of sports, and yet you being a man of God, a person of faith, and mirror that, and as a Black man, the identity, and try to build cohesion between 2 or 3 different worlds?
Well, one of the things I would do in chapel, again, I wouldn't do this every time, but every now and then I would give a word of caution, particularly to our young guys that would come in, the importance of knowing how to deal with money. Because in many cases, some of these guys, as Terry had mentioned, had come into the league and they came from almost nothing. They got a scholarship to play. They didn't learn, the financial aspect. I'm trying to think of the fellow offhand, and I can't think of his name. I don't even know if he was in basketball. I think he might have been in another sport, who went broke and signed $1 million. And of course, $1 million was a lot of money at that time. Still a lot of money to me. But now these guys signed multi-million-dollar contracts. But this particular fella had gone broke. Oh, I remember him now. In fact, Charles Barkley talked about him. I won't mention the guy's name, but I do remember his name. But Charles Barkley told a story of a fella who played with him in Philadelphia. And he said one night the guy was giving me a ride home after the game, and he had this beautiful Ferrari. And Charles said, "Man, this is a nice car. I really like this car." And the guy laughed and said, "How much you think this car costs?" And Charles threw a figure out there, and the guy kind of chuckled and said, "Man, I sniffed that up my nose in a day's time." He said later, when he got traded to Phoenix had come back to Philadelphia to play, and this guy stopped him in the lobby of the hotel and said, "Hey, Charles, don't you remember me?" He looked, he said he couldn't remember. He said, "I'm so-and-so." By this time, the guy was broke, again, signed $1 million contract, was broke, was homeless, and hung out at the hotel just to see the players as they came in. A lot of time, the sad thing is that many guys are not educated on how to deal with their finance. And I think that it's important. I think some of the teams are not doing this. I believe I think the Bulls might have been one of them, which were giving counseling sessions to new guys that come in, financial counselors, how not to just blow your money. I mean, you've never had it. You get $1 million, you think it's going to last forever. It can go pretty fast after you spent money on cars and houses and condos and all your friends and your posse and all that kind of stuff. You look up, you're broke. But, again, sometimes it's like what Terry was saying, that a lot of time guys are not educated. They're not educated as to the world that you're coming into. You're coming into a different world. It's a long way from the west side of Chicago to the NBA, staying in the best of hotels, the best of travel, the best of food, per diem. I think at one time when I was there last, like $125 a day per diem. That's money for meal money, basically. I mean, all of these things are new. And I remember even Horace Grant. Horace Grant was a good friend of mine, was a member of my chapel, faithful member of my chapel when he was a player. And Horace Grant had made mention of how when he came into the NBA, he said, I felt like a kid in a candy store. All I had to do was just grab whatever I wanted, just grab. And the lifestyle was so much different than a fella coming from, I think it was South Carolina, wherever he came from. It's a different lifestyle. And so in many cases, guys are not prepared. And again, the discipline of the game, the business aspect of the game. I remember when the word went out from the then commissioner, the late David Stern, because guys were coming to the games. If they weren't playing, they'd come and sit on the bench in sweatsuits and shorts and all that kind of thing. And the word went out. This is a business. This is a profession. If you're not playing, we require at least a sport coat. Now, I would have said suit and tie myself, but at least a sport coat. Look professional. There's a professional side to this. And, some guys, they only know how to play ball, but they don't understand the professionalism of it. One of the things I tried to do, and again, not every chapel section, sometimes caution them, you're in a different world, but just as fast as you come here, you can be gone. So invest your money wisely. You don't have to have a long, big posse, making a statement. Invest wisely so that when you finish this game, because in professional sports, the average span of a professional sports player is only like 4 years. A lot of things can take you out. Injury, paternity suits,
right?
Stuff can get, and before you know it, you look up and you got another professional player. I ain't gonna mention the name, but he had like 9 kids by 7 different women. Again, I don't need to mention his name, but I mean, again, you got to take all these kids. So I mean, I think it's important that teams invest in counseling for these young men and realize they're not just property. They're not just ball players. They're young men, in many cases, kids, 18, 19, 20 years old, to properly invest in the future, because this ain't gonna last always. It won't last always. Some may be blessed afterwards to go into broadcasting or go into coaching, but most of them are just out, So it's important that these things are done in their time there in the NBA. And I, again, as a chaplain, as a minister, I would sometime put this in my presentations. I oftentimes preach about what should it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul. Again, I would put that in there. So I think that those things are important.
Awesome. We talking about those hard conversations, Attorney Powell. How and I think it really stems back to parenting, upbringing, right? When we're talking about having that talk with these men, how do you go about having that conversation, right? And especially, like it's different when it's, your son and, you have that proximity and obviously, but when it's not your son, right? How do you establish that type of rapport so that they're able to receive information from you and then instruct them in that way? I know you've been in contact with Attorney Powell. You're closely associated with Roger Powell, right? I know when you brought him and it was Luther Head to Freedom Temple, right? How do you get them in a corner and say, hey, look, you have the option to do great things or do terrible things. Choose wisely.
I think that for like the ones that you mentioned and some that you may not name, you have to see what these people want for their futures. And that's the whole thing, is that all of these players, they're going to play ball for a while, but they're going to have a future that is either going to be a successful one or not a successful one. You mentioned, I think, Cody, you mentioned Jason Williams. Who would have thought? I remember, he had a very lucrative contract, and who would have thought that a motorcycle accident would have put him on the sideline? Now, I don't know what he's doing today, but he's not playing basketball. So, hopefully he did, maybe went back to school or something like that. But you have to see if these guys can understand that basketball, baseball, football, whatever it is a small segment of your life. And the majority of your life is going to be done doing something else. So, have a vision, have a goal. Scripture does say, where there is no vision, people perish. So you don't want to perish. Have something that you want to have lined up, in the future. If I can just say one thing, I've never really been a big LeBron James sports fan. In fact, most of the teams that I've rooted for have been teams that he doesn't play for. And, he made me at a time when the Chicago Cubs were going for the World Series, and he was in Cleveland. And, of course, he was up in the skybox rooting for the Cleveland Indians. Well, Scott Bradley, you can understand about how I feel, coming from Chicago. I want to root for the Cleveland Indians. But one thing that I do say about him that I think expresses the wisdom that he's exhibited. When he came into his first contract, I believe it was, he said, this is a lot of money, but I need to get with someone to whom this money is like chump change. Who can I link up with who would consider the money that I'm getting like nothing? So who did he link up with? He linked up with Warren Buffett.
Right.
I would have known, but LeBron James and Warren developed a very good friendship. And in fact, on one of the television interviews that Warren Buffett did, they said, well, what did you tell LeBron? He said, well, I told him, first of all, stay away from credit cards. He said, you need one, but try to limit it down to one. Don't have 10. And there were just some other bits of advice that he said he would have given to anybody. But that, when you look at him, you kind of see where his next career is. One of the shows that I like, which is on NBC, called The Wall. Okay, I don't know if you've seen it. You went over Millers on the Wall, and it's it's a real exciting kind of game show. But that's produced by LeBron James's company. So apparently that's what he's going to do after basketball is all over. So you try to understand, or you try to get people to understand, look, this is going to be a segment of your life. After this segment of your life is over, what is it that you want to do? I'm thinking about this. I'm 62 years old. I'll be 63 on my next birthday. If the Lord lets me see next March. Okay, I've been practicing law for a long time. What's the next segment going to look like? So you try to understand that, one of my favorite scriptures is from Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter. To everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven. My season of practice is going to be over sometime soon, but that doesn't mean my life is over. For the players, their season to play is going to be over, but that doesn't mean their life is over. So what does your next season look like? So I think that's one of the things that talk, if you were Cody, revolves around.
Awesome. No, that makes a lot of sense. Tony, I want to hit you with this. We have a comment from my audience 24. This Kobe fans. These Kobe fans are just love trolling me. Anyways, I'm a huge LeBron James fan, by the way. If anybody ever knows, I think he's the GOAT personally. But Tony, so you have.
I didn't mean to diss you.
You're fine. I hear it every day. I have a bunch of Kobe fans and a bunch of Michael Jordan fans, and I hear it every day. So, Tony, you work in the media aspect, right? You have literally a direct connection between the fan and the player, and you're kind of this intermediary, probably hence the word media. Is there pressure not to write certain things? If, let's say you wanted to cover, a controversial comment by Herschel Walker, who goes on the RNC convention and states that number 45 is not a racist. He invited me to Disney World. You know, I don't, you know, hey, that's a direct quote, right? I watched it. I watched Herschel Walker say it. And I don't have anything against him. I thought he was a fantastic running back. But if NBC or not, it doesn't have to be NBC, but anybody you're affiliated with says, you know, hey, Tony, you know, kind of calm down, cover more, you know, great stories like, I don't know, most improved player of the year, Giannis, I don't, you know, or something that is a bit more palatable, right? We got to be mindful of our constituency. Is there pressure because you have a job to do, right? You have bills, you have your own life. Is there conversations like that? I mean, can you give us some insight into the media world?
Yeah, but I think our current president kind of ended all of that a while ago. There was a saying, you know, going around earlier, probably at the point of Colin Kaepernick, was stick to sports, where media entities across the United States, because this is strictly, if you think about it, it's only a U.S. problem. Other media outlets across the world, they can cover, you know, anything political that has direct influence on their sport. In America, it was different for a few years. I remember specifically when I was before I started working at NBC, I was working at another company. A host was let go because he was speaking on, you know, police brutality in its relation to what Colin Kaepernick was speaking out on. So yeah, there was a lot of pressure for companies not to be called out by a small but loud group. They're small, so they're not, you know, impacting much. They're just really, really loud. And companies were scared of that point. And as a Black man wanting to speak out, it was hard. It was difficult. Like you said, I was young when this started to kind of gather momentum. I was really young in the business. I didn't want to push any buttons, but you still want to make a statement. And Terry mentioned before, it's not, you know, sometimes it's not, you know, what you say, is how you say it. So finding the correct way to say it, but still get the point across in a palatable way was the constant thing that's on a media member's mind when they are from these communities and they see the poor and disenfranchisement of them, and they do want to speak out on them. And now it's easy now. It's easier to do it now. And we see it because there are people from other communities are now speaking on it, because now it's kosher. But I remember just a few years ago where it wasn't so kosher to speak on these things. People were losing jobs. People were losing promotions or being viewed differently because of their outspokenness on these issues, and not particularly because they were saying anything wrong. It's just because big major media companies, they got really, really scared at one point. I mean, it was the NFL, for example, they were scared of getting called out by Trump. That was the thing. You didn't want to be in a Trump speech to rile up his constituents. But now people have seen the wrong. And again, people have said it many, many times way before me. Racism and police brutality hasn't gone away. It's just on camera now. So now people are getting to see all these things firsthand through their phones, through their computers, through news. And now people are really starting to get the picture. And hopefully things can continue to change. But you're right, Cody. In the media, it was hard for a little while, but now it's easier because things are now cross-contaminating itself into politics, as people like to say now. But it certainly has become easier to speak out on these things now.
Awesome. Look, last question. You going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to something Scott was saying too, but in pertinence to Herschel Walker, what we should never forget as celebrities, whether we're in sports, law, entertainment, media, whatever it is that your celebrity offers you opportunities that the common man doesn't have, even after you no longer do what you do. So when you open your mouth, you're not opening your mouth as a common man or woman. You're opening your mouth as a celebrity in the eyes of those who surround you. So when Herschel talks about the president doesn't see Herschel the way we see him as a black man. He sees him as a celebrity. And remember the scripture, the proverbial writer says that a man's gift makes room for him before great men. You know, when your gift gets you in front of these people, that is an opportunity and wisdom, you know, to be able to speak with clarity, you know, the direction of what's going on in your society. But if you're not touched with that society, you can only give them a celebrity perspective.
That makes sense. Last question. I want to ask this to all of you. Terry, if when all this started, I remember the Colin Kaepernick. I remember the taking the knee. I remember the backlash. I remember the socks. I remember all the NFL owners turning their back on him. And literally, there's no reason why he shouldn't be in the NFL today, especially when I look at even the Bears starting quarterback, right? Mitch Trubisky. You can't tell me that Kaepernick can't beat him right now. So if Kellyanne Conway watches this segment and says, Terry Cummings, shut up and dribble, what does that mean to you as a professional athlete, as a black man?
Well, first of all, people like that, I've run into them all my life and career, you know, because if you're halfway intelligent as an African-American or black person, they don't really know what to do with you. If you're aware of your cultural background and your history, they don't know what to do with you. So I ignore ignorant people and I deal with them on the level of what I do know. And I talk to them on that basic level. If we can't have a reasonable conversation, I tend not to have one with people because I think it's foolishness to sit up and argue over something that going in, you know, someone doesn't believe in. So why have the conversation? Talk about apples and oranges instead, because it's of more relevance than the conversation you're going to have with this person. In the Kellyanne type, it's more about publicity and being on camera. I'm not seeking no fame. You know, in my life, where I am and what I do for the God I serve. And I have always done it that way. I've always made it a heart set mindset to do it for him. That way I would never get it misconstrued about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So to answer your question with clarity, if I was confronted with Kellyanne or the other Fox anchor who said the thing to LeBron, I wouldn't even give her the benefit of the doubt, because I think your integrity is worth more than sharing it with someone who's ignorant.
Well said. Well said. Attorney Powell, Kellyanne Conway watches this and says, you Kojic preacher and attorney. I don't know if shut up and dribble would probably be the phrase, but shut up and I don't know, be legal and preach. What would be your response to that? Hold on, I think you're on mute. I got you. Okay.
Well, I would, okay. All right. I think if it were Kellyanne Conway, I think that I would have to pray hard and ask her to get with her husband, Mr. George Conway, and for them to get their act together as they're raising their children. Although I don't want to bring anybody's children into anything, but it's public notice now that she left her job, George left his job to take care of issues at home. And anybody can have that to happen. Anybody can have issues at home that they need to have happen. As you alluded to, Cody, I do have some right-wing conservative Republican folks I know who, when I came out on Facebook and applauded the Milwaukee Bucks for what they did, they responded back saying, oh, they should just shut up and play ball and that's all. And, that is so short-sighted. And, as Terry said, you're going to deal with those type of short-sighted individuals. You can't do anything about that. So you just have to, do what you do. I was very proud of what the Bucks did, along with the other NBA and the WNBA and Major League Baseball. I just hope and that their stand that was taken, now that the games have started back, that they're not viewed as having caved in too soon or anything like that. I pray that they're able to, as Terry said, use their celebrity for something that is beneficial to the nation and to other folks. But yeah, you're going to run into those types of people. I don't know Kellyanne Conway personally, but I know those types because some of them, have chimed in on some of my Facebook posts. But you know, you can't help everybody. Can't help everybody.
That's it. Can't help everybody. Pastor Bradley.
Yes, sir.
Kellyanne Conway watches this. Says, you know what? I didn't even like the Bulls. You should have been a chaplain for the New York Knicks. By the way, how did Steve Nash get that job today? But anyway, for the Brooklyn Nets, I don't understand. But anyway, I won't go down there. That should have been Mark Jackson's role. I'm gonna call that out on another episode because that's kind of white privilege. But it says, Scott Bradley, go back to being a chaplain. Shut up and chat. I don't know. But shut up and be a chaplain. What would be your response to that?
You know, I've thought about that situation and that quote to tell LeBron to shut up and dribble. And I had said in my mind, you know what he ought to do. Now, again, I had no access to tell him that, but tell him what my advice was. But here's a young man who has invested in his community. He's invested his money and has set a school for education, free tuition, free lunch, scholarships, all of these type of things. I think, and again, this is the way I think. I think that at the dedication of the school, I would have had a plaque put up and invited that Fox host to come and dedicate the plaque to make her see how foolish she was to make such a statement. What if this man had just shut up and dribbled? What if this man had just figured, I don't want to upset nobody, and I'm just going to play ball? You know, it's interesting. I look at Doc Rivers, the statement he made after the shooting of Jacob Blake. And I guess I'm kind of partial to the Rivers family because we grew up together. I've known that whole family since we were kids growing up in Maywood. I knew the father, the mother. The father was, in fact, a policeman well known in the community. I was in school with his brother, Grady. We're about the same age. But I look at the powerful statement that this man made. Now, here's a man who is an NBA coach, a successful NBA coach, a championship NBA coach. What if he had just not said anything? And even as Terry said, and I think Elliot alluded to it, that because these individuals are high profile, these are the ones that should speak out. I remember when Muhammad Ali spoke out again. I'm old enough to remember Muhammad Ali, and when he spoke out and refused to be drafted, and there were those even in the black community that said that he's made a lot of money at the hands of people. He should just basically shut up and box. And they didn't say that, but that's basically what they meant. But it's because that these individuals are high profile. They have a voice and a platform that your average person does not have. How many people have looked at the Rodney King video? How many people have seen the young man who was shot reaching for his license, or the other fella who was choked to death saying, "I can't breathe"? How many people saw that and spoke out against it, but they don't have the platform? But here is a man, LeBron James, and you know, the argument can be made whether he's the GOAT or not. You have to understand that there are great men of different eras. I remember Julius Erving, and as far as I was concerned, that was the baddest dude I ever saw. Then, of course, came Michael Jordan. Then, of course, came others. But my point is this. And when, in fact, the Lord has given us a platform, I think that we should use that platform. And there are those that the naysayers that will say, you're making a lot of money, just make that money and shut up. But to shut up and dribble means that an opportunity that would benefit many people, in particular in your community, and quite possibly even change the world, you squandered because you won't say anything, because you just want to play this game. I admire LeBron James. And again, my mindset was, just as a reminder, I'm going to put up a plaque in the school that says, shut up and dribble. And come on here, Miss whatever your name is. I want you to dedicate the plaque. You know, that's what I would have done. Again, that's my train of thought on that. You know, so you can see that there's more to this thing than just dribbling. There's more to this thing than playing ball. I have a platform. I've been blessed, but I also have a voice. And I think it's important that men like LeBron James, men like Doc Rivers, and others, you mentioned Kurt Flood earlier, Elliot, I do remember that situation, to speak up and to use your voice, because your voice and attitude, backed by the actions of LeBron James, would make an impact and change the lives of people. And who knows, in the long run, could change the entire community.
Awesome. Tony, Kellyanne Conway, or any of the hard right wingers, Donald Trump sends you a tweet that says, you know what? I used to like NBC Sports Chicago. I was a fan. There was a rising young man, but after this, I'm not a fan anymore. Says to shut up and you know, do media stuff, right? What would be your thoughts if you received some type of backlash like that?
I mean, it's not like it comes just from just a person on television. If on Twitter, it happens all the time. Elder Powell said it. People comment all crazy stuff all the time on people's posts, and hey, just stick to do what you're doing, or some version of shut up and dribble, but just in different forms. But it obviously means the same thing. And we get that every day, every time people get uncomfortable about something. And I think it's good that they're uncomfortable. They should feel uncomfortable because they know that means something is wrong, or you're delusional, either one or the other. So when people want to use the word, don't put politics in. This is where I used to get my escape, and I just want to get distracted for a couple hours, and it's excuses to me. You can do two things at once. You're an adult. You can multitask on things, and I think that was the big thing. What Milwaukee did by saying, no, you're not going to use us as a distraction or a continual moneymaker, right. At least for the next couple games, right. While there's serious stuff going on in the real world that's affecting our families and our communities. Mm-hmm. They had a player on their team that was a victim of police brutality. So this really hit home for them, on top of that Jacob Blake being from their home state. So when I tweeted out a couple days ago that the stick to sports mantra, is dead forever. For me, it's forever dead to me. One, because Trump continues to dabble in sports because it gets his constituents riled up. He constantly tweets that he wants football back. All right, now he wants to talk about sports. I get to talk about what he is doing in terms of holding a progression back. That's our lane now. And again, like I said before, that even though in years past the media has been hindered a little bit on talking these subjects, now the window's wide open to speak out on these things, and you don't want to be on the wrong side of history. And I think a lot of big entities and a lot of large companies and teams and platforms, they don't want to be on the wrong side of this, so they're allowing a lot of people, a lot of Black voices to be elevated to speak on these issues, and allowing players to speak their minds and speak on these issues. Because again, people are writing this stuff down. We're going to remember 2020 forever, and 2020 is going to be a poignant year in the world's history, not only American history. And when we tell that story again, do you want to be that major company, that major entity that sided wrong on this? And I think just purely based on the money that they could potentially lose being on the wrong side of this, I think companies are really being careful on what they do and how they go about these things. So you can tell me to shut up and do my job, but I think that stick to sports mantra is dead.
Awesome. Look, I want to just thank my guests again, Terry, Tony, Scott, Elliot. You guys have been fantastic. Where can they connect with you? I'll start with you, Terry. What are you doing? Where can the people connect with you?
Website is hemi.church. That is our website address. Probably the best way to reach us, 404-781-5281. Active in ministry here in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Been pastoring going on 13 years. So that and our outreach and music, and I'm in the entertainment business for about 35 years. So we're here in the city of Atlanta working.
Awesome. I got to come to ATL, man, and check you out. Atlanta's a second home. Anybody knows me, I love Atlanta. Attorney Powell, where can they connect with you? What are you doing?
I'm still practicing law, so you can get me at attorneypowell@yahoo.com. ATTORNEYPOWELL, no punctuations. attorneypowell@yahoo.com.
Awesome. Pastor Bradley, look, they're hiring right now in Brooklyn. They're just giving the stuff away and skipping over a lot of qualified individuals. If you want to be a chaplain, you just make that call. What are you doing, man? Where can they connect with you?
Well, I do a Facebook Live every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. on my Facebook page. You, of course, go to Scott A. Bradley, and we do a teaching every week. We replay it during the course of the week. We play it on various spots on the Church of God in Christ website, on the I Belong to the Church of God in Christ website, among others, Rivers of Life website. You can connect with me at scottbradleyministries.vp. That's V as in Victor, P as in Paul, vpweb.com. That's my website. You can see my writings, my books that I've done, the CDs and things that I've done. So again, that's scottbradleyministries.vpweb.com. God bless.
Awesome. Tony, where can they connect with you, man? What are you doing?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at VTonyGill, TheTony Gill on Twitter and on Instagram. You can follow all my stuff there. We go back and forth. We can talk sports stuff and have a good time. Also, let me shout out my church, Philadelphia Church of God in Christ. You can follow that Facebook page. We stream every week, all the time. So shout out to Philadelphia.
Awesome. Look, connect with these individuals. These guys are doing amazing things. These guys are leaders in their own right, leaders in the professional field, the media field, and the faith field. You have 3 pastors on hand. Tony's an up-and-coming, rising dude. I see him. You know, I call him the new Stephen A. Smith. I appreciate my guest so much. But until next time, guys, thanks.
God bless.